Thank you, Ms. Rosen. And the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, is recognized for his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I appreciate each one of you being here today. Glad to have you, and appreciate the very interesting testimony. And I was very interested in the Puerto Rican observatory, and I'm grateful to hear what's going to happen there. One thing that seems to have been highly emphasized here today, and it's appropriate to emphasize it, is the budget, because we're talking about budget today. But what I continue to hear is the detriment that's going to happen to the budget from my friends across the aisle. But it's okay to point out problems. I don't mind pointing out problems. Let's tackle them. Let's take them head on. But when we talk about percentage of growth in, say, tech spending in China versus tech spending in the U.S., nobody talks about what the baseline is. Because if you're going to make an assessment that's on comparability of funding, you really need to know what the baseline is when you start talking about percentages. And China, over the last 30 years, has increased dramatically in their overall funding and tech spending. But their baseline was very low to begin with. And now the projections are sometime in the early 2020s, they will actually meet somewhere near where the United States is. But as far as real dollars go, the U.S. continues to be a leader there. And I think that's critical to understand. And then the other thing I would say, there's a lot that goes into creating a national budget. And China already is overall matching EU spending, according to the reports that I just read, because I was curious when I start hearing all this, I said, I'm going to pull up some reports and see what I can get. But there are other things that are not, other variables not in consideration here. For instance, are we tacitly subsidizing anybody else who's doing research, because we're spending defense for defense and military and protecting those countries so they can put money elsewhere? What level of taxation do my friends want to support the spending level they seek? And then are there other programs within the federal government that they might wish to reduce to backfill what they view as a reduction for the NSF? So these are some thoughts that I raise before I get to my question, but I appreciate that you're here and actually for a forum to kind of vent on what solutions are being brought to the table, because I'm just hearing problems brought to the table. The federal government has been funding STEM education for decades, Dr. Córdova. Every year, larger emphasis is placed on the subject, and every year we hear how we're falling further behind. I'm interested in knowing what have we learned from previous investments in STEM about what is working, what is not working. How can we be confident that new investments are being put in the right place for the right activities? In other words, how can we become the most efficient, the most effective?
Great, thank you. You have a whole range of things that you've covered there. So I'll start with solutions, because that's where you're going, and then I'll ask Dr. Farini Monday to answer your last question about STEM and efficiencies, and especially evaluation and assessment, which is our middle name. That NSF is well known for doing that for all of its programs. But on solutions, that's why we have structured a different budget for FY19 than we've presented heretofore. That we have a number of National Academy reports out of committees of the National Science and Technology Council, advice of our advisory councils, and advice of the National Science Board, that we need to be especially strategic in this day and age to meet challenges and to try to deliver solutions for the country as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And that's why we came up with this idea that is now a structural idea in our budget of convergence accelerators, to try to target those areas that are most ready because they have the most public interest and the most industry participation, and really go after some near-term solutions in that space that we can bring to people very quickly. The majority of our budget, as you know, NSF welcomes all proposals. It's what we call our core funding, and we fund blue sky ideas. We take some risk. Some of them, like the LIGO that we funded for 40 years, after 40 years they produce Nobel Prize winning results. But we also need to reserve a part of our budget to be very strategic and very focused on solutions. So we're doing that, and I hope that you will like the results that we get from this. But let me turn to Dr. Farini Monday about evaluation and assessment.
Thank you. So that's a really important topic for us. We want to be sure that our investments in STEM education are strategic and are likely to have impact. And for that reason, for many decades now, NSF has funded not only attempts at intervening and improving STEM ed, but attempts to study and evaluate and assess the effects of those kinds of efforts. And I'll cite just a few key results where we really have a solid basis in research to talk about change and improvement in STEM ed. One is at the undergraduate level, and we've got academy reports that help with this. But we've learned very firmly through research that to retain undergraduates in STEM, a very key principle is to engage them actively in their learning. And so to be sure that instruction is really designed to bring those students in, to give them research experience as a part of what they're doing in their undergraduate courses, and to make sure that they have the chance to really see what STEM looks like in practice. That sounds fairly straightforward. It turns out to make that kind of a change in our nation's universities is not straightforward, but it's something that we know that we should be headed toward. At K through 12, we know a lot about teachers and about what will help teachers be most effective in getting kids to learn well, and some of that has to do with the nature of how they understand the STEM subjects and how particularly elementary teachers in such fundamental areas as mathematics are prepared to be effective in meeting children where they are and moving them toward deep understanding of mathematics. So we have an array of findings, and we're applying those in how we actually design our programs.
Thank you. I've far exceeded my time.
Thank you, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from California.